If you thought the government only wanted to control your tax money, you were being naive. They wanted the real prize, your mind. Welcome to part 2 of our deep dive into the darkest secrets of American history. We left off with the destruction of the body, but now we are entering the era of psychological warfare. And the crown jewel of this madness was Project MK Ultra. If you think mind control is just science fiction or a plot for Stranger Things, you haven't read the declassified CIA documents from the 1950s and 60s. The Cold War made the US government paranoid that the Soviets had mastered brainwashing. So the CIA decided they needed to master it first. MK Ultra was a top-secret program with a simple goal: figure out how to break a human mind, empty it out, and reprogram it like a computer. They used everything they could find: hypnosis, sensory deprivation, sexual abuse, and massive amounts of drugs, specifically LSD. They didn't just test this in a lab with volunteers. They experimented on prisoners, mental patients, prostitutes, and even their own unsuspecting agents. One famous victim was Frank Olson, a CIA scientist. He was secretly dosed with LSD by his colleagues during a retreat. Days later, suffering from a massive breakdown, he fell to his death from a hotel window in New York. The CIA called it a suicide for decades. His family called it murder to keep him quiet about the program. But the ripple effects of MK Ultra are even crazier. One of the volunteers for a psychological experiment at Harvard, which was likely linked to MK Ultra research, was a brilliant young mathematician named Ted Kaczynski. The experiment involved brutal psychological humiliation designed to break his ego. It worked, a little too well. Years later, Ted Kaczynski moved to a cabin in the woods and became the Unabomber, sending mail bombs to universities and airlines to destroy the technological society that broke him. It is a chilling thought. Did the US government accidentally create one of its own worst domestic terrorists in a lab? But while the CIA was trying to chemically alter brains, the medical community found a much blunter tool. If you can't drug the crazy out of someone, why not just stab it out? Welcome to the era of the ice pick. In the mid-20th century, if you were depressed, anxious, or just a difficult housewife, you might be prescribed a lobotomy. This procedure won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1949. Let that sink in. The highest honor in science was given to a procedure that involved sticking a metal spike into your brain. The champion of this method in America was Dr. Walter Freeman. He didn't like the old method that required complex surgery. He wanted something fast and cheap. So he invented the transorbital lobotomy. Here is how it worked. Freeman would take an instrument that looked exactly like an ice pick. He would insert it under the patient's eyelid, hammer it through the thin bone of the eye socket and into the frontal lobe of the brain. Then he would wiggle it around to sever the neural connections. He called this soul surgery. He did this to thousands of people, often without anesthesia, just using electroshock to knock them out. He even drove around the country in a van called the Lobotomobile, performing brain surgeries in hotel rooms like a traveling salesman. The most tragic victim was Rosemary Kennedy, the sister of President John F. Kennedy. She was a bit rebellious and had mood swings. Her father, Joe Kennedy, worried she would embarrass the family's political ambitions. So, at age 23, he forced her to have a lobotomy. The procedure failed horribly. Rosemary went from a vibrant young woman to having the mental capacity of a 2-year-old. She lost her ability to speak and walk properly. She was hidden away in an institution for the rest of her life, a living ghost created by her own father's ambition and a doctor's arrogance. If you think the government wouldn't go that far to manipulate reality, let me introduce you to Operation Northwoods. This is the smoking gun for every conspiracy theorist who says the government did it. We have moved from controlling individual minds to manipulating the collective mind of the public. In 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officers in America, drafted a plan to justify an invasion of Cuba. They wanted to start a war, but they needed the American public to support it. So they came up with a plan to attack America. The document, which is now declassified and available for anyone to read, proposed a series of false flag attacks.
The proposals included hijacking American planes, blowing up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay, and orchestrating a terror campaign with bombings in Miami and Washington, D.C. They planned to murder innocent American citizens and blame it on Fidel Castro to create a pretext for war. Let me repeat that. The Pentagon planned to kill Americans to start a war. The only reason it didn't happen is that President John F. Kennedy rejected the plan. He thought it was insane. A year later, Kennedy was assassinated. I am not saying there is a connection, but it certainly makes you wonder about the enemies he made within his own government. While the military was plotting wars, engineers were reshaping the Earth itself. The Panama Canal is hailed as one of the greatest engineering feats in human history. It connected two oceans and changed global trade. But underneath that water lies a massive graveyard. The construction of the canal was a war against nature, and nature fought back hard. When the U.S. took over the project in 1904, they inherited a death trap. The jungle was swarming with mosquitoes carrying yellow fever and malaria. The heat was unbearable, and the rainy season caused landslides that would bury workers alive in seconds. Official numbers say about 5,600 workers died during the American construction phase. But if you count the earlier French attempt, the death toll rises to over 25,000. That is 500 deaths for every mile of the canal. But here is the dark American twist. Even death was segregated. The workforce was divided into gold roll, mostly white Americans, and silver roll, mostly black workers from the West Indies. Gold roll employees got paid in gold, had nice housing and good medical care. Silver roll employees got paid in silver, lived in shacks, and did the most dangerous work. When they died, white workers were shipped home in coffins. Black workers were pickled in barrels or dumped in mass graves on the edge of the jungle. The canal is a wonder of the world, but it was built on a foundation of apartheid and disposable human lives. Finally, let's talk about population control. We have discussed sterilizing the mind with lobotomies, but what about sterilizing the future? In the mid-20th century, the US government and elite philanthropists were obsessed with overpopulation, especially in poor territories. Their laboratory for this was Puerto Rico. From the 1930s to the 1970s, a massive sterilization campaign was launched on the island. It was so common that people simply called it La Operación, the operation. Government officials and doctors went door to door, convincing women that sterilization was the best way to escape poverty. But they often lied. They told women the procedure was reversible, or they didn't explain it at all. By 1968, 1/3 of all Puerto Rican women of childbearing age had been sterilized. That is the highest rate in the history of the world. It wasn't just about family planning, it was eugenics, the idea of improving the human race by stopping the wrong people from breeding. They also used Puerto Rican women as guinea pigs for the first birth control pills. The dosages used in the trials were huge and dangerous, causing severe side effects and even deaths, which were ignored so that the pill could be perfected for white women on the mainland. The freedom of the sexual revolution in the 60s was bought with the suffering of Puerto Rican women. We have seen how the government tried to control our minds with LSD and sterilize our future with forced surgeries. But sometimes, the greatest horrors aren't caused by malicious scientists in a lab. Sometimes, they are caused by simple negligence and then erased from history because the timing was bad. Ask anyone to name the worst maritime disaster in history, and they will say the Titanic. But the Titanic was a luxury cruise for the rich. The real worst disaster in American history happened to the poor, and you have probably never heard of it. Meet the SS Sultana. In April 1865, the Civil War had just ended. Thousands of Union soldiers who had survived the living hell of Confederate prisoner of war camps like Andersonville were finally going home. They were skeletons, sick and weak, but they were happy. They were packed onto the steamboat Sultana on the Mississippi River. The captain, driven by pure greed, overloaded the boat. The Sultana was designed to carry 376 people. The captain crammed more than 2,400 souls on board because the government paid $5 for every soldier he transported. The ship was a floating time bomb. The boilers were leaking and needed repairs, but the captain refused to wait. On the night of April 27th, while the soldiers were sleeping, dreaming of seeing their wives and children again, the boilers exploded. The blast tore the ship apart. Men were scalded to death by steam, blown into the sky like ragdolls or thrown into the icy, flooding river. Those who didn't drown were burned alive as the ship turned into a towering inferno. Over 1,800 people died that night, more than on the Titanic. So why isn't this in your history books? Because President Abraham Lincoln had been assassinated just a few days earlier. The newspapers were too busy covering the hunt for John Wilkes Booth. The death of 1,800 poor soldiers wasn't breaking news compared to the death of one president. These men survived the war, only to be killed by corporate greed on the way home, and history didn't even bother to write a eulogy. From a prison of water and fire, let's move to a prison of stone and silence. Alcatraz, the Rock. We know it as the place where Al Capone was locked up. Movies show it as a place of daring escapes and tough guys. But the real horror of Alcatraz wasn't the bars, it was the silence. In the early years of Alcatraz, the warden implemented a strict rule of silence. Prisoners were forbidden from speaking to each other, not a word, not a whisper, for years. Imagine being locked in a cold, damp cell, surrounded by other humans, but hearing nothing but the clanging of metal doors and the howling wind. This was psychological torture, designed to erase the individual. Men went insane. They would scream into their pillows just to hear a voice. Some chopped off their own fingers or mutilated themselves just to be sent to the hospital wing, where they might get a chance to speak to a doctor. The rule of silence was eventually lifted because it was deemed too cruel, even for the worst criminals, but it left behind a legacy of broken minds. Alcatraz wasn't just a prison, it was a laboratory for sensory deprivation. And speaking of mind control and cults, we arrive at the most terrifying phrase in American pop culture. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. It refers to the Jonestown Massacre of 1978. But the reality is far worse than the punchline. This wasn't just a bunch of crazy people committing suicide, it was mass murder. Jim Jones, a charismatic preacher who started out fighting for racial equality, slowly morphed into a paranoid monster. He moved his congregation, the People's Temple, to the jungles of Guyana to build a socialist utopia. But it became a prison camp. When U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan flew down to investigate reports of abuse, Jones had him assassinated on the airstrip. Knowing the U.S. military would come for him, Jones ordered revolutionary suicide. We have the audio recording of that night. It is known as the death tape. It is 44 minutes of pure nightmare. You can hear Jones ranting over the speakers. You can hear the babies crying. And then you hear the screaming. The parents were forced to feed cyanide-laced punch, actually Flavor Aid, not Kool-Aid, to their children first. Once the children were dead, the parents had nothing left to live for. Those who refused to drink were held down and injected with poison or shot. Over 900 Americans died that night, including 300 children. It remains the largest loss of American civilian life in a non-natural disaster until September 11th. It is the ultimate lesson in the dangers of blind faith and the charisma of psychopaths. Finally, let's look at a tragedy that didn't end with a bang but continues to poison bloodlines to this day. Agent Orange. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. military wanted to strip away the jungle cover used by the Viet Cong.
So, they sprayed 20 million gallons of herbicides over Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The most famous was Agent Orange. The government told the soldiers it was safe. They said it was just a weed killer. Soldiers would walk through the mist, soak in it, and even use the empty barrels for barbecues. They didn't know it contained dioxin, one of the most toxic substances known to man. The result was a boomerang of destruction. We know about the horrific birth defects in Vietnam, but the chemical also came home. American veterans started developing rare cancers, skin diseases, and nerve damage. But the most heartbreaking part is what happened to their children. The children of Vietnam veterans were born with missing limbs, extra fingers, and heart defects at a much higher rate than the public. For decades, the chemical companies and the government denied any link. They waited for the veterans to die off so the payouts would be smaller. Agent Orange proved that in the pursuit of destroying an enemy, the American government was willing to poison its own sons and daughters for generations to come. So, here we are. We have traveled from the infected blankets of the 1700s to the chemical warfare of the 1970s. We have looked at the teeth of George Washington and the glowing bones of the Radium Girls. Why do we dig up these graves? Why do we stare into this abyss? It is not to hate the country or to disrespect the past. It is because history textbooks are often just victory laps written by the winners. They leave out the bodies buried under the podium. But if we want to understand who we are today, we have to look at the scars. We have to understand that the American dream was often paid for with the nightmares of the marginalized, the poor, and the innocent. The truth is a messy, bloody, and uncomfortable thing, but it is the only thing that can set us free. Now, I have a question for you. Which of these facts hit you the hardest? Was it the pigs, the teeth, or the silence of Alcatraz? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you made it this far, you are part of the 1% who actually cares about the truth. Prove it by smashing that subscribe button and sharing this video with a friend who thinks they know history. Let's wake them up together. I am Infinite Fantastic Facts. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next deep dive. Sleep tight if you can.